So the transitions are basically, we have one piece of artwork, we want to switch to a different piece of artwork. That's what we're doing. So you'll see these different colors that are popping up. Those are all the transitions. Different ways that we can, again, go from one piece of artwork to another piece of artwork. And here's some more slide transitions. Not that.
Hello and welcome to Media.
Oh, how to create. We don't want that one. So again, you're going to see a common thread between all of them. It's basically just a repetitive pattern, okay? But the idea is that something goes on the screen and then something comes off the screen, okay? So these things come in and then they go away. They come in, they go away. Come in and go away, okay? So that's the idea with all of these, is that we want some way to get in there and get out. This is very useful, especially for your demo reel, when you may have 20 or 30 different pieces that you're trying to transition. Now, these are used kind of sparingly. You wouldn't have a piece of video, and between every new piece of video, you have one of these crazy transitions, okay? So that's what we're going to be creating. So first, you're going to watch me create one, and then we'll create one together. I'll close that, okay? So, as always, we create a composition. Now with all of these, we're going to eventually be creating 5 different page transitions, okay? So the size of these is kind of important because we want these to be kind of usable. Now, a 30-second duration for a page transition is probably a bit too long. If you remember the ones we just watched, they were most likely 2 to 3 seconds long, okay, at the very longest of them. Okay, the more complex it is, the more movement that's in there, it's going to take a little bit longer. But you really don't want to go over like 3 seconds. So if you go up to your composition button and you go to new comp, and all we have to do, or should have to do, is change our duration to 300. That gives us 3 seconds. Our size is 1920 by 1080. Everything that we create in this class is going to be at that resolution, because that's basically where the industry is now for creating content. If this is going to a website and it's going to be used in something smaller, obviously you can make it smaller. The problem is, if you ever make anything small and you want to expand it, you can't do that without pixelating it. So it's always best to make things bigger, and then you can shrink it down to whatever size. So we're going to go with a duration of 3 and hit OK. All right. So now we need something in here that we could animate in and out. All right. So if we wanted to create a rectangle on here, what's one way we could do it? The shapes, right? We go up to the top, we go to where it says rectangle, and we create that. Okay. Now this creates a shape layer. It gives us a bunch of cool stuff that we could play with. There's another way that we could create basically just like a blank document inside of our stuff. I'm going to go down to layer, say new, and we're going to create a new solid. Okay, and we'll call this starter. Okay. The width is 1920 by 1080. By default, it sizes it to whatever your composition is. Okay. We're dealing with square pixels. If it didn't come in the comp size, we could click that button. And then we also have, here's the color of this. Okay. So if I choose this, I can pick a color. It doesn't matter right now. I'm going to go with just kind of like a medium color just so I can see it better. And then hit OK. And that was under layer, new, and then solid. Or you can hit Control Y. Okay. Now this gives us basically just like a blank canvas. There's nothing fancy with it. It's just a flat image. There's no other options down here except for the default options. So this is basically just a little bit cleaner than creating a shape layer. So if you don't need all the bells and whistles of a shape layer, you can create a solid and it's much more low sized. So what I want to do is I want to create a transition where it basically wipes on, okay? So I'm just going to have this just change from one color to another color. So in this case, I'm going to go with, I'm going to zoom out a touch just so I can see over here. I'm going to hit P for position, and I'm going to, let's say I go to 1 second, and I'm going to set a keyframe for position. I'm going to go to 0, and I'm just going to move it straight off. So I hold down Shift as I drag it straight off. Okay, so there's my animation. Now I animated it backwards. Did you catch that? I went to 1 second first and set my keyframe, and then I went to 0. Why would I do that? I'm already there, right? The position is already set up perfectly for where I want to be. So I go to frame 1 or to 1 second and set my initial key, then go backwards and move it off. Okay, that way it moves on. Otherwise, just so you can see what I would have to do, let's say I set my first keyframe off here. Then I go up to 1 second. Now I have to figure out where this thing is actually supposed to be. And maybe I don't get it perfect. Maybe I zoom in. It's one of those days where I am perfect. There you go. Maybe we're off just like a pixel or two, okay? So we don't want that. So it's easier just to set your first keyframe and then set your other one. All right. Even when I'm doing like a bouncing ball, if I'm bouncing a ball up and then down and up and down, if I have that same keyframe of the ball being on the ground, I'll just set that keyframe throughout and then go back and set the uppers. So it's much easier to do. All right. So I have this. Whoop, it comes in. Now, going to our 12 principles of animation, one of them was timing, right? Timing was very important to do. So this animation, it's kind of slow, especially if I'm going to be doing 5 of these, okay? I don't want to have one color here. You always want to have more than one color or more than one item popping in, and usually odd numbers work good. So if I had 5 of these slide cars sliding in here, it's going to be really slow. So I'm going to take this and just kind of pull one of my keyframes back a bit. So maybe to there. Okay, so now it's a bit quicker. What was the other one that dealt with the speed of it? Not just the timing, but the speed. What was it? Easy ease, right? Easy E. So we're going to add easy ease to this. Okay, remember you don't need to follow along with this one. You can just watch, and then we'll do it together. Okay. So now with this, you can see we definitely have some more, some better speed. Okay. Now here's where we can go in and tweak this a bit further. So if I go to my position, go to my graph editor, here's the graph editor that we were looking at before. And again, this is the more confusing, more advanced graph. If I right click in here though, I can change this to a speed graph, which gives me basically one line. And this one line is basically how fast is this item going. So if I look at this, you can see that it's going very fast, kind of slowing down, and then going very fast again. That's pretty much what we want. But what I want to do is push that speed so it's a bit quicker, okay? So if I click on one of these points, it gives me handlebars. The only thing I need to do with these handlebars is pull them either left or pull them right. So I'm going to pull these to the left first. So I pull that left. I'm going to go to this one, pull that left. Okay? So now where is it the fastest? Right after it starts. Okay? So right here, it's really fast and then it slows down. Okay? I'll make this a bit bigger so you can see it, and I'll zoom in so you can see that better. Okay, so it's going to go really fast and then slow down. So now watch the animation as it comes out. Okay, so you can see how it comes out pretty quick and then slows down right at the end. We can really see that transition at the end where it's filling in at the last little bar of this. Now let me switch it the other way. Let me click on that. Let me pull these to this side, and then I'll pull this one to that side. Now sometimes this does move up and down. I just keep it at 0 right there. All right, so now where is the speed at? At the other end. So now what we should get is slow and then fast. Okay, so it should go and like basically like slap shot. All right, I'm going to do another thing here too. My animation is only from here to here. I'm going to go shortly after that, and I'm going to hit the N key. The N key basically stops my thing from going to play the entire thing, and it creates a little loop stop. Okay, so instead of looping through the entire thing, it cuts it. It crops it to say, I just want to loop this area. Okay, it's called your work area. So now when I hit play, okay, so now we have more of the black at the beginning and less at the end. Again, a lot of this is going to depend on what you're animating and how you're animating it and what you want it to look like. As easy as this will be for you once we get to it, adjusting that's going to be no big deal. So you could literally go through and say, let me see what it looks like this. Let me see what it looks like that. Which one do I like better? Maybe I want to go halfway between. Maybe I want to tweak it. Maybe I want to do whatever. Okay? So for this one, I actually liked the way it looked before. Like that. So it's faster at the beginning. Okay? And it always helps to make a little sound effect too. Okay? If you don't make a sound effect, then your timing is going to be really off. Because watch this one. Look at, I'll make it really big. See how you can tell right there, it's slow. It's definitely too slow. But if I know it's fast, I bring it back here. I change my work area. See, much better. Okay, so I've created one, and that one is exactly what I want. Now I want to duplicate that one. So I duplicate it using Control D. Okay, so now I have 5 of these things. The 5 items are the exact same color, the exact same animation, in the exact same spot. So it doesn't help me at all. They're just doing the exact same thing. So what I need to do is I need to go and offset these. So right now, here is, just so you can see it, here is all of their animations stacked on top of each other. Okay? If I take the bar here and I scoot this over a little notch, and I scoot that one over, and I scoot that one over, and I scoot that one over, what we should get is this one on the bottom starts first, then this one on top, then this one, then this one, then that one. So basically it's just like layering right on top of each other is what should happen. Okay? Now because they're all the same color, that doesn't help me either because I won't be able to see this transition. So I'm going to go to each one of these and I'm going to pick a different color. Oops. That was right. I'll pick just obviously different colors just so you can see it. I'm going to use green yet. There we go. Okay. So now if I rewind this and hit play, you can see we have exactly that. We have these layers coming out, and then it fills it in. Now, even though these ones don't disappear, that end green one could be a transition into another piece. Okay? So they don't always need to come out and then go away. They could just come out and introduce a different background color that a new piece will then be animated on top of. Right? So if I'm going from just this boring background and I wanted to animate, let's say, that bean animation, right? So I wanted a green background. So instead of just like fading in green or popping in a green thing, this might be a neat way to kind of start that animation. That's the way it gets me to the green inside there. Now, one of the other animation principles was appeal, right? Solid drawing was one too. So this kind of fits into a couple different areas. So with appeal, those colors are horrible that I chose. Okay, they're just ridiculously ugly colors, and I did that because you have to be careful with what colors you're choosing. If you are horrible at choosing colors, like I'm pretty horrible at choosing colors, you can use color.adobe.com, or you can use, I think there's a spot inside here, Adobe Color Themes under Extensions. And if this is linked up correctly, I think it's loading. But what it does is it's a resource for you to be able to see color profiles that allow you to easily find colors that go together. Okay. There's also an app you can get on your phone. It's Adobe Capture, and what you can do with it is you can take a picture of stuff, and the picture will actually go out and it'll grab colors and use those as a color scheme, which is pretty neat. So here's Adobe Color. So you can look at this and say, I want to explore themes. And here are basically some color themes that could go together. Okay, I'm not saying they all do. These are all uploaded by people. The idea is that you find something that looks nice, something like that, or something like this, or something like that maybe. Or you can make your own color theme by going here and saying, I like green. I want my darkness to be up there a little bit more. And then you can pick the kind of green that you want to match. So using this, I can find other colors that kind of match that same shade of green that I've used as my initial color. Okay? So if you're bad at choosing colors that don't go together, use outside resources. Okay? Use this. That finally loaded. Okay? Maybe it didn't load. Create. Yeah, it's not loading. Just go away now. Just go away. There we go. Okay. So for any colors that I do, I use like a mathematical formula to figure out what colors I choose. It's kind of my way to do it. Okay. So now here's our little animation. And you'll see this one is only a second, right? We're done by a second. So this one is nowhere near 2 seconds that we planned out, or 3 seconds that we allowed ourselves to do. So what I can do is I can move my work area here. That's what that N key did. Move my work area to where I want this to be done. So let's say right there. Scoot this back in. And then I can go to composition and trim it so it fits perfectly right there. Okay? So you don't always have to worry about getting your timing exact. We can always come back and tweak that. Okay? Now another thing that will help this kind of sell a little bit better is it looks a little bit too CG. Like it looks too perfect, too clean. So one of the things we can do to this is we can add in what's called motion blur. Motion blur takes something like a fast moving object and it blurs it so that it looks like it's moving faster. Okay? So if I pause it in the middle, and this is the turn on motion blur. So I turn it on. Now, when it's on, it's not on for everything. It's only on for specific layers I tell it to be on for. Okay? If you have 100 layers, all those may not need motion blur. 5 of them may need motion blur. So you specify these are the 5. So this icon coincides with that icon, so I turn it on. And so now you see we got a little bit of blurring happening between them. And so now that adds a nice little bit more speed to it. It feels a little bit more natural, a little bit softer. All the settings can be adjusted too, so if we need to pull back the motion blur, we could. But for right now, I'm just going to leave it. Okay? So that's how you're going to create one of these. All right? So now let's make one together. I'm going to rename my comp. There we go. Okay, so if you haven't done so already, new project, so you have a new project, and then composition, new comp. And for every one of these, make sure you name it. So I'm just going to call it transition underscore 01 for my first transition. And then make sure your duration is set to a 300. And let me know if those computers back there are still working with this or if they crap out. Good so far on everything else? Okay, we have a new composition called transition 1. Remember, if we need to, we can always come up here and then hit enter and rename whatever we need to rename. Another thing I wanted to point out, notice how when I created my solid, I actually got a new folder up here that says solids, and it has all of my solids still in here, okay? So when you make a solid, it actually creates a solid, but that solid could be used anywhere. So if I have another composition, I could drop that into another composition, okay? So that's what that's going to be. All right, so transition 01. Last time before we started doing our other stuff, we made a folder up here, right? We made a folder to keep our stuff organized. So let's make another folder and call this comps. And I'm going to drop any comps that I have into the comps folder to keep that nice and organized. We're going to make 5 separate page transitions. So we're going to have 5 separate compositions, and in those 5 separate compositions, we may have a number of solids that are going to go into that. So again, keeping our stuff organized, very important. Okay, so we are in our composition. We have our folders here. So notice how if I go up to layer and I go to new, all this stuff is grayed out. I have to make sure I'm clicked on the composition before I go and add a new solid. And for your first color under the layer new solid, choose a color that is basically, I use it as a base color. Like I'm going to make something green, so I would choose like a good mid-ground green color that I want to use. Just remember you can change all that stuff too. Okay, so we went to layer new solid. You can put the word. So I went with this green color as my base layer color because I want to start off with that base color. Remember, everything is changeable. So if I decide in a later project I need to use complementary colors, or I need to use yellows or blues or whatever, I can always come back and adjust these parameters. Okay? So I'm going to go through and animate the position. So we hit what key to get the position open? P. So we hit P. Okay? Then what do I do before I set my first keyframe? What do we do?
Move it to 1 second.
Right. Move it to 1 second. So we move our time slider to 1 second. And then we click on the stopwatch. Okay? So we adjusted our time slider to 1 second. We click the stopwatch. That gives us our first keyframe. Then what do we do? Move back to 0. And then slide it off. Now make sure when you're sliding it off that you start sliding and then hold shift so it goes straight. And then also make sure you actually slide it all the way off the screen. Okay? So we went up frame 1, or 1 second, we set a key. Went back to 0, moved it off the screen, and then set our other key. All right, so we've set our 2 keyframes. If we were to hit play, it would just do that. What was our next step of doing? What was that? Easy ease, right? So we're gonna, you can click on the individual keyframes, like if I hold shift, I can select them. If I click on the word position, it automatically will select all the keyframes in that timeline. Then you're gonna either hit F9 or you're going to right click, keyframe assistant, and then go to easy ease. Okay, and you have to right click right on the keyframes themselves if you do that method. Okay, so it's either clicking here and hitting F9 or clicking there, right clicking on this, keyframe assistant, easy ease. Okay, now that gets us slow ins and slow outs. The next step that we want to do is actually go in and tweak that graph, okay? Because all this is going to do is basically slow the start and the end. It's not going to give priority to the front or priority to the end of it, which is what we want. So the little graph right here, we want to click on. All right, so we click on the graph, and then by default, you're viewing this graph, which is the value graph, which allows me to edit each attribute individually. If you right click in your graph and go to edit speed graph, then you'll get the one that just has the one arc to it. Okay? Now because position is one item, it's actually two items kind of bunched together, we're only seeing one graph. But if we have position, scale, rotate, and opacity, and whatever else, we would see an individual graph for each one of these things. Okay? So what we do is we click on the individual point. That brings up handlebars. So you can see the little yellow handlebars in the bottom. And then we just want to grab the end of the handlebar, the little round part, and pull it left or right. So like I said, I like mine a little bit faster at the beginning. So I'm going to just drag this to the left. And then I drag the other one also to the left. Okay, so you just drag those little circle handlebars to the left and to the left as far as they go. Eventually they'll stop. And then you can hide the graph and then preview it and see if you're liking the way it looks. Remember I said, you do a little sound effect while you're doing this? If I was to do a sound effect, that's moving way too slow, okay? So instead of this being at 1 second, I'm going to bring it back to about 20 frames, okay? So if we're at 30 frames a second, that cuts it basically a third off of it. So now I should get something that's a bit quicker, much better. Okay, maybe even a little bit further, maybe like 15 frames. There we go. Nope, I like it closer to that. Okay. A lot of the stuff that we're doing is just kind of feel, as you look at it, you might look at it and say it looks too fast or looks too slow. Sometimes walking away, coming back to it will definitely help kind of get a better eye for this kind of stuff. You could watch this thing do this 100 times and it may look like it's perfect, then you walk away and come back and then it looks different, all right? I've even had it just like helping people where I'm like, it looks like it's changing and then it hasn't been changing or something, different things happen. All right, so I just nudge these keyframes together. Now doing that doesn't affect our graph. If I go back to my graph, our graph is still the same, okay? If I were to have edited the other graph, the value graph, and then I started squeezing keyframes together, it would have distorted those graphs and made it look wonky, so we don't want that. All right, so now we have this just kind of swooping in, okay? So now we want to click on the base color and we want to hit Control, hold Control and tap Delete 4 times. Or sorry, hold Control and tap D 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's already 1:17. I can't talk. So now we need to offset these. Now because we need to offset these and because they're layered, I need to take the number 4 one and offset that to the right, okay? And I only do it like 2 frames-ish. So if I grab this and just scoot it over a couple frames and you can see it clicking, then go to the next one and click that over a couple frames past that, and a couple frames past that, and a couple frames past that, okay? So I'm just clicking and dragging right on the bar and just scooting it over just so it clicks a couple frames past it. Okay? So this arrow pointing at my bar is definitely different than this. Okay? If I do this, which is like a double arrow, when I start dragging, it's cutting my composition or cutting that layer off. All right? So if I go here to the bottom and I start dragging this, it's not moving that. It's simply like saying don't play this part of that animation or that part of the layer. Okay, if I drag it, it takes the keyframes with it. All right, so make sure that we're doing the right thing as we're dragging. Also make sure, this is something that's going to come up, if you've double clicked the layer, do you see how your screen is going to look different? You have this red bar down here. At the top it says layer base color, yours does, right there. So if you click on this little X, that will close that out, okay? So basically what happens is we can look at a composition, which is what we're looking at here, or if we double click a layer, we can look at the layer itself. But we don't need to look at the layer because it's just solid green. Okay? So now what we need to do is go back and change the color of all of these, except for the one. So if this is our base color here, is that green, what I do is I go to the middle and I leave that one as my base color and I change the other two, okay? So if I go to, let's say, number 2, I go to Layer, Solid Settings, the hotkey is Control-Shift-Y, and we just choose a different color. Okay, so I hit the next one, Control-Shift-Y, click the color. And then go to the next one, Control-Shift-Y, pick a different color. Okay, so this is what we would be doing for a page transition. You can see the process is pretty straightforward. We made a solid, we set a couple keyframes, tweaked the speed on them, and then just duplicated it and offset them and change color. Okay, that's pretty much what it's going to be for every single page transition we do. Make one animation, duplicate it, offset it, change colors, and all that. So I'm going to save mine into just the playing around folder for now. And I recommend you put your name on there at some point. And then I'm going to open up some other page transitions that I have just so you can see the differences in some of them.